This week I'm going to be talking briefly about pupil voice. Pupil voice comes, although it's not a new idea, it's been expressly talked about in the Code of Practice. The Code of Practice 2014 talks about two main things. One is pupil voice, the other is quality first teaching. There's also an assess, plan, do, review cycle so that we're constantly revisiting what we're doing, seeing how we can adapt it and make it better. The thing about, it's also parent voice as well as pupil voice that matters. Now with pupil voice, a good illustration of why this matters would be trying to explain. There's a discussion with a child at a meeting and we were talking about help that he receives from teacher assistants, and he said, it was a lovely child, and he said to me, the only problem is quite often a TA will come and they'll say to me, you know, are you okay, can I help you? And he'll say, I was okay until that happened. And the minute the teacher or the TA came up to him, that would have thrown all the ideas out of his head and he could no longer remember what he was going to do. So he was fine until he was actually asked if he was fine. So I thought about that, and it was something I hadn't considered. This came totally from the pupil. And I said, well, you know, could you just say to them, you know, don't disturb me? He said, well, it's too late by then. The fact they've asked means, you know, that. He said, and also you feel a bit rude. So I thought and thought, and then I came up with the idea of a card, and the card would be like Post-it size. And the idea was that one side was green, one side was red, and if you had that card out on the desk in front and it was on the green side, then that meant that you were fine, you didn't need any help, so please walk by, don't stop and help me. If it was on the red side, then that would be, yes, I need help, could you come and give me some help? And it was a way of asking for help without the embarrassment, because that was the other thing he also said. He said he felt self-conscious if he was asking for help. I then added a tick to the green side and across to the red side because of people who are colourblind. I had a pupil who was colourblind, and it sort of made me realise, not initially, but as I say, we revisit things, we learn, we adapt, and it made me realise the tick and the cross were important so you could see the difference. And eventually we had planners in the school. Once the children had their own planners, I added to the planner a green page and a red page. And that meant that they could keep the planner open on whichever page they wanted. If they wanted help, they could put it onto the red page, and it was a quite a sort of inconspicuous way of doing it. You didn't feel like you were putting your hand up, please miss, all the time. You could just put it on the red side. It was also a way of making it something that everybody had, because the reality is a lot of the strategies we discuss for children with various special educational needs don't hurt anyone else and can in fact pick up those people who might otherwise fall through the cracks. They may not have a special need as such, but they might require some sort of support. So that's one example. And the reason I've got this puppet with me today is she's the sister, Marmalade, aren't you? Yes. The sister of a puppet that I used a lot in my previous school. Children often, if they have EHCPs, that's Education, Health and Care Plans, or if they are, as this child was, a LAC child, a looked after child, they have reviews where they need to give their contribution. Now for some children that's not a problem, but others, especially children who have either had emotional difficulties or might have special needs, one of the biggest difficulties is actually saying not the negative but the positive. That can be really hard for them, and one of these things that are on these forms are things like, what are you doing well at school? What are you enjoying? What would you like to do next year? And these can be huge questions for certain children. So this is where the puppets come in. Quite often, and certainly I'm thinking specifically right now of a looked after child we had, she'd be very reluctant to say anything about what was going well or what she liked. She would say things to please, so it would be like you. She'd say, oh, I like you, you're my favourite teacher. And then if somebody else were conducting the interview, she would probably say that to them. It was more of a need to please. But you could say, well, can you tell, and it wasn't marmalade in that school, it was Sapphire, you know, can you tell Sapphire what you do well, or what you could do to improve, or what you like, and all the rest of it? And she would speak to the puppet, she'd speak to the cat, and she'd tell the cat, and I would write it down, and then afterwards I'd read it back and check she was happy with it, and she invariably was. But it was harder for her to say it to me than to the puppet. So it gives you a distance, if you like. It sort of just removes it slightly from being so immediate, and it allows the child to then express things they may otherwise be reluctant to express, but that we do need to know. These are important things. And having the pupil voice, you know, we can so easily misread a situation. We can think a problem is one thing and it's actually something else. It can be, as I say, this child who needed this red and green card. You know, there were two things going on. One, the minute somebody asked if that child needed help, all ideas just out of his head, couldn't remember what he was doing, and suddenly he really did need help. But also that reluctance to actually both ask for help and ask to not have the help. So finding strategies around this to still ensure that the pupil has a voice can be a really important thing. Thank you.